Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Green Room Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is not Colin Mitchell. Colin is not here. It is Carter Yates of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, college sports writer. Does a great job. We've followed him for a long time, read his stuff. Definitely has a great feel and great pulse of the college football scene and recruiting and everything he does. So, wanted to have him on, talk North Texas football. And yeah, how are you doing today, Carter?
I'm going to do my best to fill in for Colin right now. I know I can't live up to it, but I'm going to try.
That's all right, because Colin and I would have like a random 5-minute spiel to start off. So and honestly, people probably skip through it anyway. So it's okay. We could just cut out the fat. Not calling Colin fat, of course, but we could just cut it out and just talk North Texas football. We didn't do a podcast last week. Colin's actually getting married next.
Con-
No, sorry, in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks.
okay.
So
Congratulations to Colin.
he's got his hands full. So we won't bother him. We won't bother him. But yeah, I'll be out there in McKinney in a few weeks to be at the reception and everything. So we'll see when we get our podcast schedule lined up. But until then, we want to get a football pod up. And honestly kind of just do an overview of North Texas as a program, and then kind of your thoughts on North Texas, and kind of go back and forth in terms of, where we agree, where we disagree, and just kind of talk it out. So I guess let's just start at year one for Eric Morris. North Texas, in your eyes, kind of where do you assess like the job that he did, the situation North Texas is in, and kind of overall him as a coach? Like, do you like him as a coach? Do you like what he does? Just what are your overall thoughts on North Texas under Eric Morris?
Yeah, I like Eric Morris as a coach for sure. I think year one, he played a little bit of 5D chess, and he came in as I want to run the 3-3-5 because that defense gave me nightmares when I was the Texas Tech offensive coordinator. And the early returns are not great on that 3-3-5 defense. He also started Stone Earl over Chandler Rogers, who he brought in Chandler Rogers from the transfer portal. I don't know what kind of fall camp performance Stone Earl had, but it must have been electric.
Insane. It must have been that was the funniest thing the whole time. We were just before the season, after this, everything was like, if you just watch any of Chandler Rogers' tape from ULM, you're like, oh, this guy can sling it. And he was like carrying ULM in a lot of games. And then he gets there, and we're like, wait. Stone Earl's gonna be the starting quarterback. Like we know Stone Earl, we love Stone Earl, but like as a backup to what Chandler Rogers can do. And for 2 games, Cal, and then the first half of FIU, you're like, wait, what am I watching right now?
Well, and if North Texas wins that FIU game, like they're going bowling. So
Yes.
that decision, I think we talked about it on the ROF show this past Wednesday, but if Chandler Rogers starts versus FIU, they win that game, they go bowling. Like, so that's how it was a little bit of sliding doors moments, in UNT season. I think he did a great job of after the 0-2 start where the sky could have been falling. He brought the guys in and said, you're either with us or you're against us right now. And he drew the line in the sand. And I think UNT looked a lot better from that moment on. Look, he is one of the best offensive coaches in the game. He's going to scheme an offense to score 45 points a game, like if he needs it. Really, in this offseason, I'm looking at the defensive side of the ball, and it just has to get better.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up, after that 0-2 start, because we were in a situation where after the 0-2 start, it was Morris kind of being like, we got to find everybody that's bought in. Typical like year one stuff, in a sense that you have to find the players that you didn't recruit, that maybe stayed, maybe took a whim as a transfer or as a freshman, and be like, they don't completely know you at this point. And now you lose to FIU, which is a terrible loss. And you have to kind of rally the troops.
Yeah.
And they did that to a degree. Like that was the most surprising part, is that they were able to not only rally the troops and beat Louisiana Tech on the road, which was a crazy game, But then throughout the conference schedule, is like they kept losing these close games to like Tulane and Memphis and so on and so forth. Not to make everybody relive that, but they kept like fighting and they kept like coming together every single time and hanging in there. Besides the SMU loss, and that was honestly the most impressive thing to me was that they kept getting up off the mat when it very easily could have flushed the season. Like the players could have clocked out and just been
Yeah.
like, "There's no way we're beating UTSA. Like there's no way we're beating Memphis." And they just kept giving themselves a chance and losing, but like they were there the whole time.
And I think the building blocks were there, and you had excitement about UNT this upcoming year. Then the transfer portal hit a little
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
I mean, UNT, was it the first time that they had a 3,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard wide receiver, and 1,000-yard rusher, and then
yep.
all those guys transferred out? So I'm sorry, UNT
Do
fans.
you want to?
To
Yeah,
me,
here. Do you want to see the Google Doc that I have
yeah.
from last
Let's
year?
pull up the doc.
It's just red.
Mm,
It's just red. It is
yeah.
just red.
So
So
they got pillaged in the transfer portal, which
yeah,
I think kind of put a damper on some of the hopes for the upcoming year. But we're going to talk about some of the transfers they brought in. I think they rebounded about as well as they could have. And Eric Morse is a guy who he said in Mike Craven's magazine stop, you're not going to make excuses about the current landscape of college football, which I know we're about to dive into later. Not make excuses. You just got to do what you can with what you got. And they went out in the transfer portal and got a couple of really interesting pieces on that team.
yeah. Let's talk about a couple of those. Chandler Morris. I know you did a story on, I believe, the most intriguing players for each team in Texas, and Chandler Morris
Yeah.
was the one you had for North Texas. He wasn't there for spring ball, which isn't great. You would like to have your potential starting quarterback, or at least you guy that's competing for that job, to be there for spring, but finished out his year at TCU before heading over to North Texas. Is it like what do you think of Chandler Morris? How do you start assessing him, and what do you think he can be at North Texas?
I think Chandler Morris and Stone Earl are going to have a fall camp battle for the ages because you got to remember Chandler Morris beat out Max Duggan, the
Yeah.
original Heisman finalist quarterback 2 years ago. I think Chandler Morris is a guy who can thrive in the American Athletic Conference. I mean, he is a smart, heady player, the son of Chad Morris, obviously the longtime offensive coordinator at Clemson, and now the wide receivers coach at Texas State. I'm not as concerned about Chandler Morris missing spring ball. I know you would want your potential starter to be there, but I think he's a guy you don't have to worry about off the field. Like he's going to be putting in the work. He's going to come in. He's technically a junior, but he's one of those juniors this is his 5th year of college football.
Mhm.
So he's been around the block a while.
Yeah.
But Chandler Morris still has to prove himself because I know injuries kind of derailed his career at TCU, but he was healthy at the end of the year last year, and Josh Hoover kind of ran with that job. So both times he sprained his MCL, and then Max Duggan comes in, leads the team to the national championship. Then he starts again last year for TCU, gets hurt on the MCL. Josh Hoover comes in, takes the job, and they basically choose Josh Hoover over him. So I think Chandler Morris and Eric Morris has career-defining potential for Chandler as a quarterback. I don't know about the surrounding supporting cast pieces around him.
Yeah. No, side tangent. Going from Chandler Rogers and Eric Morris to Chandler Morris has been one of the more
Uh-huh.
incredible changes, and
Well,
in terms of names.
it's one of my favorite jokes is like, Eric Morris. I love Eric Morris picking up Chandler Morris for Chandler Rogers because Morris has the football IQ that Morris loves, but then Chandler's got the moxie that Chandler has. Just like total brain melting
Yeah,
the
because
brain
it's like
pretzel moment.
in journalism school, it's like, all right, well, if they have the same name, if they have the same last name, you gotta address the first name, and then so it's just like so many things going on in my mind um, every time I talk about them, no matter what. And then I get the head coach, Morris head coach from SMU. What was his first name? Was he Chandler Morris as well?
The
Uh,
the former SMU head coach, that's Chad Morris.
Chad Morris. Thank you.
That's his dad. That's his
Yeah.
dad.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I get all of them. Just too many Morrises and Rogers and whatnot. Chandlers in my mind. So, anyways, let's talk about some of those just offensive transfers. They did get a lot of them, and I might be leaving a couple out, but Oscar Hammond, tight end, has made some really big strides and has been someone that they've been impressed with. Um, Receiver, it's been just, I mean, Dalton Carnes from Houston, Kalen Carter, DT Sheffield. I'm not too worried about the like receivers now. Would I have loved to have even Rod Burns still on this team, or obviously Jamori Macklin, yes, but ultimately, I'm not like Landon Sides was good for them as a freshman. Blair Conwright, like they have enough players, I think, at receiver to do what Eric Morris wants to do. The interesting part is like last year they still had like the remnants of a Seth Luttrell team with the offensive line and the running back room. And
Mhm.
now it's like they don't really have a great offensive line situation besides Gabe Blair and maybe like Jet Duncan
But Jed
and the
Duncan's
running back.
going from tackle to center now.
Yeah, so he's moved around, and then the running back room kind of got gutted as well, obviously with Iowa Day and Oscar Attaway both leaving and Isaiah Johnson leaving. Not saying they won't be able to run the ball, but it looks very, very different than it did last year.
But it's like the running back room used to be the four horsemen of Denton. You had four guys with 1,000 career yards,
Yeah.
and now we were relying on Trey Bradford from LSU, and he stopped in Denton for a cup of coffee, and
Yeah.
he's already out. I think I agree with you on the receiver point because look, Jamori Macklin was the 1,000-yard receiver last year. 2 years ago, he was 16 catches for 380 yards. So I think there is someone on this team that's going to step up like that. Like looking at Blair Conwright, Jeremiah Aaron, some of those guys to take a significant step. I totally agree with you with the running back situation. Like, is it Zach Evans? Is that
Yeah.
the presumed starter?
I
What?
would assume so. I don't know the Ikaika Ragsdale situation well enough, and I don't think they expect him back to at least not back at 100% to start the year. From what I understand, I think that it might be like a conference thing, like get him. He might need another month.
Yeah.
So I would assume Zach Evans is the starter. I might be a little off on that, but I don't think I'm way off on Ragsdale needing a little bit more time.
And I like the pieces of Gabe Blair and Jet Duncan as returning guys, but Jet Duncan now is moving in from tackle to center. So that is kind of a steep learning curve there. You
Mhm.
brought in some nice transfers like Larry Moore, Landon Peterson, I think are guys who have a chance to really develop, but it's a lot more question marks than what the Seth Luttrell teams were like, where they've got a good offensive line and good running back situation. It's almost flipped now to where I feel a lot better about the quarterback situation and the wide receiver situation.
Yeah. I mean, and it was supposed to at some point, right? With
Uh-huh.
Eric Morris. Like that's what we I said last year, it didn't feel like on either side of the ball, honestly, it didn't feel like what an Eric Morris offense like going into the year, like it didn't feel like what I expected it to like look like with all these running backs and all these honestly, the running backs that had never really caught passes, that was a big thing going into last year was that like, oh man, they're having to learn how to like, run these routes and catch these balls and pass protect better or more. And the offensive line, I remember we had Gabe Blair on. He was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to get better at pass protection because we've just been running the ball the past 2 years. Like it's just how
Mhm.
it's been." So that being able to kind of transform from year 1 to year 2, the roster, I think that is gonna be something that will work in their favor. I mean, it didn't really matter because last year they scored whatever, but, this year I do like them and in terms of their, potential just to feel a lot more like an Eric Morris team.
But you even saw Eric Morris having to scheme it to where they're doing a lot of wide receiver screens because
Yeah,
they weren't confident in the pass blocking on the offensive line.
yeah. How much did you watch Cash McCollum? How much you
I saw one game of Cash McCollum live, and it was against Stephenville last year. So this was my first high school season this past year covering. So I didn't see
Mhm.
the state championship game. What I he's Cash McCollum, I know you say this about every white guy, but he's sneaky athletic. I mean, he actually
He
hurdled
does,
a guy when I watched him, and he throws a really pretty ball. I mean,
yeah.
he throws with anticipation. He layers the ball, like he can zip it in there. But he threw one across the field where he scrambled and threw it across the side of the field over a defender's hand. That was really nice. The game I watched, he was under pressure the entire time. Stephenville's offensive line was destroying China Springs' offensive line, and he's tough, man. He's tough. He's tough as nails. I wouldn't expect him to obviously start. I wouldn't say he's a starter within the next 2 years, but he's a nice developmental prospect.
When you say that in terms of developmental, like how do you see him? Like, where do you think he needs to develop the most? Like, is it like an accuracy thing? Is it like, does he need to quicken the throw motion? Is it like feel for the game, you think? Or because obviously the tools are kind of there in terms of like
Yeah.
the size and strength. You're like, oh wow, he's 6'4", he can sling it. But then it's like, all right, if Chandler Morris is only here for in theory, let's say he's only here for 1 year, it's like, is he is he can he start year 2? Like, how much better does he
Yeah.
have to get?
I don't know. Let me walk that back. He could probably start year 2. I'd probably definitely not this year, but start the next year. After that, I think he needs to get just a little more size on him. Just obviously being
Yeah,
a high school kid, he was very tall, a little bit more lanky. He'll get some more size on him once he
yeah,
gets in the college weight room. I think in general, just more feel for the college game. There's nothing specific I can point to where okay, he needs to get way better at this. And I
yeah,
haven't watched him enough, honestly, to make that call. But just
yeah,
general feel for the college game.
yeah. I mean, and yeah, no one's really starting as a freshman in college, as in terms
No.
of quarterback and in college football now, especially nowadays with transfer portal, when you don't have to, like, if your starter leaves, you can just go get another starter. It's just interesting. I'm interested to see how he kind of looks within the offense and if he could be a potential starter year 2 at North Texas. All right, we can talk about the defense, I guess. I guess we can talk about the defense a little bit. um in theory, there are a decent amount of returners. In theory, they got better as the year went on. Like, they had
hmm
actual, like, moments, halves. Heck, they even had like 3/4 stretches where they were like holding down Tulane and holding down UTSA. Like, they as the season went on, they actually were decent.
hmm
But ultimately, like, the big picture is the big picture, and you have to replace a decent amount of talent, and the defensive line is a problem. But overall, I don't know what to expect from a North Texas defense. Like, the ceiling, if you can get in the top 100 of a in the country, I think that it's great. I think you're in a great spot.
Oh, 1,000%. Am I wrong in saying that North Texas, it seemed like shift to a little bit more four-man front last year as the season went on?
They toyed with it. They did toy with it. I do think they're gonna try to stick with a 3-3-5 for the most part,
hmm
though. I think that that's what their goal is. I think because he didn't change defensive coordinators, right? So it's gonna stay the same with Capone. I think that they believe in the 3-3-5 enough to where, and they had enough success late in the season to where it's like, okay, let's give it another
Yeah.
shot. Let's run it back. We have Rod Brown. We have some pieces here. I think that that's the goal.
So there's two ways to look at this. North Texas, part of the rushing defense problems on the 3-3-5 is because the safeties just weren't big enough presences in the
Correct.
run game.
Yeah.
They weren't as big. So you go to the transfer portal, you get a guy like Hasheem Young from Iowa State, BJ Allen from Texas. These are bigger guys, former Power Four players who can come in and, if not start, rotate through and be more physical in the run game.
Yeah.
I also look at it, though, is when you have a 3 down front, those linemen have to be huge. I mean,
Mhm.
those linemen, you gotta the reason it works so well at Georgia and Iowa State in the Big 12 days, because the defensive tackles were 300 pounds. I know Roderick Brown is 300 pounds, but after that, there's two guys on North Texas's roster who are 3 Bills. So that's where I don't know if in the transfer portal they got enough interior defensive linemen to really fix that defensive line. I know they got Jake Shipley from Oregon. That was a huge get, but I'm talking about the nose tackles and defensive tackles.
Yeah, that's the hard part with the 3-3-5, and that's why they kept getting gashed because you can't fill enough gaps in the 3-3-5 if especially when it's a true like basically a true 3-3-5 and you're like the outside linebacker is really not on the line of scrimmage. Because there's some 3-3-5s where that outside linebacker is like there, like on the outside of a tackle, but in this 3-3-5, it's like you have to be able to eat blocks, and
Yeah.
also for what it's worth, like I don't, I think they had one of the weaker linebacker units like in the conference last year. I just don't think they had
Mm-hmm.
a ton to work with there.
Have you
Carson
heard of a
Strong.
line? Have you heard of a linebacker that's really stood out in spring ball? Like I'm
Yeah, I
looking at
think
JJ Jean Louise.
Yeah, I think JJ Jean, is it Luis or Lewis? I don't know which one.
It's I said it and it's definitely Louis. It's JJ Jean
Whatever it
Louis.
is. Yeah, him. I think Jordan Brown. It's so funny. Like I remember when they signed Jordan Brown, and I watched Jordan Brown. And I was like, this guy as a freshman like could play, and now we've just been waiting on him to kind of break out, and it
Mm-hmm.
hasn't really happened yet. Um, so that it's still a concern. Um, I think the defensive line, in theory, like they've added enough players to where there's enough talent here. But like you said, like in a 3-3-5, you kind of have a different role, a different job. Like you can't. It's not just all about pass rushing or whatnot. So
Well,
the
and that's
strength.
why
Good.
I think Jake Shipley is a perfect guy for that because I felt like last year Mason Richards was playing out of position the
Yeah,
entire year. I mean, they tried to move him to a 5 technique and he was 250 pounds. He
yeah,
excelled as an off-ball linebacker. Jake Shipley is more of that big body defensive end that you need to eat up blocks in there.
yeah, for sure. So and then I think you're right on point in terms of the safeties have just so much on their plate, and Asheem Young's been like the one standout. Like he's been Oscar Hammond's been good as far in terms of like a transfer, which he was a junior college, I believe, or was he D2? One of the two. Like they have had some good transfers, but I think Asheem Young is like the one you're like they really think he's the difference maker there. And if he can be
Mhm.
like, even if you just have him, which they also have like Evan Jackson and Javen Anderson in terms of young guys, and you mentioned BJ Allen, but like Asheem Young is the one if he can make plays from the safety position in the run game and then also obviously in the pass game, it changes the complexity of this like it changes what they can be. And
Mhm.
that's the exciting part in terms of getting safeties in this defense is probably the most important thing. Like that, and then obviously they'll have to rebuild the linebacker room eventually. But like this, having a safety and then a couple young guys that can play as well, I feel good about them in the back end. Especially then you go to corner, and I like what they have at corner too.
And you talked about them getting in the top 100. Dude, I'm saying if you're 105,
Yeah,
like if they
yeah,
were 105 in defense last year, they're a bowl team.
yeah. They're
Easy.
probably 7 wins.
Yeah.
I
And now,
mean,
okay, it's not all on the defense too. Like I know the offense was great last year in points per game, but there was a lot of times the offense started
yeah,
very slow in those
yeah,
games where it's too late, and they were spotting them 21 points basically. So I don't want to just like
yeah,
take a dump on the defense and say that was the reason UNT didn't make a bowl. But
yeah.
I mean, like 133rd in the nation in rushing defense
No
isn't
way.
going to get it done.
Yeah, it's the defense will definitely be the one. All right, we can kind of pivot a little bit. I obviously when I asked you to be on the podcast, I kind of obviously scrolled through and read the stories that maybe I haven't read yet, and you did a story on the highest rated player for each college team in the upcoming college football video game.
Yeah.
And you had Gabe Blair as North Texas pick, which I would agree with. And you had him at 82, which I also would agree with. I think 82, 83, somewhere in there. It's hard when you get to the mid majors and the G5 teams because it's like he's the best player on the team, but ultimately like when the college football landscape is so big, there's like 10,000 plus players in the game. So you have to
Mhm.
like I'm interested to see how they end up rating players in this game. But who did you consider anybody else? Was it always Gabe Blair? And like, what was your, I guess, thought process in this story in general, and then obviously
Mm.
with North Texas?
Well, a lot of it, I looked at the all conference guys
Yeah,
is really what I did. So Gabe Blair is a former all conference guy and one of the returners. If if it was the same team from last year, it probably would have been Chandler Rogers would have been the highest rated, but
yeah.
Gabe Blair coming back, so I picked him. Really, he was the only guy on the offensive side I really thought about. I
I think
don't know. Well,
Chandler
who do
Morris
you
is the
think?
only one. I'm
So
Morris. I would have had no. I wouldn't have him at 82. It's a fun thought
well,
exercise. This
maybe
is my
though.
shit right here. Ranking and rating things. I am this is what I do for fun. Like I have a top 100 NBA player list of all time. Like I just rank things randomly or rate them. When I was a
Uh-huh.
kid, I would just go and be like, I would go through every depth chart on 2K or whatnot and just like adjust it to what I think like the ratings are and whatnot. So this it's very interesting to me, and I actually did this with LSU. Is I ranked every or I rated. I said I did a prediction piece on what I think every player on the team will be rated in the 2K in the
So
upcoming college football game.
are they gonna do updated rankings as the season goes on?
I
Because I
think
think
they
if
need to
Chandler
have
Morris
check.
starts balling out.
I do think they need to have checkpoints. Like every video, every Madden, FIFA, 2K, they have updated ratings. I don't think it should be every week. I think it needs to be once a month. I think it needs to be the 15th of every month. Like
Uh-huh.
we drop a ratings update, and boom,
Have you
boom, boom.
seen,
Just keep going from
like,
there.
the pictures of the Madden rating guy that's at
Yeah.
practice and training camp taking notes?
Yes.
Is that what you wanna be? Is that your dream job to be the
That's
NCAA
not my
rating
dream
guy?
job, but that is hilarious. Yes. Um,
I think
yeah,
Chandler Morris, like, there's an argument he could be 82. I think he could up his game to, like, he's 87 by the end of the year. If he The thing about Chandler Morris is he's 6 foot, 190 pounds. So I think he's a great quarterback, but he doesn't have those
yeah,
dynamic measurables to where if he was Joe Milton's body,
yeah,
then yes, I would put him as 85 overall because Joe Milton can throw 1,000, like 100 yards in the air. But
yeah,
Chandler Morris is going to be a guy that needs to prove it this season before the NCAA rating guy bumps him up.
yeah. Like I'd have him probably like a 79 to start the year,
Mhm. I'm
somewhere in
really
there.
interested to see though how they rate the G5 guys.
It's gonna be yeah. I'm very interested as well because it is they're not gonna have like the best player from the Sun Belt be like I don't think like they'll have the best player from a mid-major conference be like a 96 overall. Like I just don't think they're gonna do
No.
that. Like it so I think you're pretty square or I think you're pretty right on with Gabe Blair being like an 82, 83 somewhere in that range. It's just so many players to rate. It's 5 times as many players to rate at least in college football than it is in Madden. So
Mhm.
it's gonna be a lot. Um, but yeah, I thought that was interesting. And while you're here, and I know you got a lot of feedback on Quinn Ewers being 96. Um, I was I was doing the LSU one, and I put Garrett Nussmeier at an 88. And
Oh.
I think I put in the story, I don't think it's a strong quarterback class. I don't think there should be a quarterback that's rated over 92 in the
Mhm.
country, which might sound harsh, but like 96 is high for a guy that could have like I Quinn Ewers. Go ahead. I'll let you talk. Sorry, I'll let you talk. Go ahead.
Well, I thought 96 was high originally. This They might put him at a 98 or a
They might
99.
do that.
And I don't think Quinn Ewers is a 98, 99 player. I'm more aligned with your thinking of this is not a strong quarterback class. I don't know if I'd go 92. Like that's pretty low. But it's Carson Beck, Shador Sanders, who
I mean, if
Shador
none of
Sanders is
them
going to
get
be
drafted, like
101.
if right now Carson Beck and maybe Shador like are the only two that are like top 10 in most top 10 picks, most top 10 mocks, like for the
Mhm.
most part, right? Like if we're saying they're not a top 10 pick in the draft, I don't see how it could be like a 94. Like I don't think Shador personally, like I would have Shador at like 91, 92 because I'm not sure he ends up the top 10 pick. But like a lot of it's projecting, I guess, in a sense. But like Carson Beck, Shador Sanders, Quinn Ewers, I'm forgetting somebody, aren't I?
Brother, Shador Sanders is going to be 101 in that game. You know that.
With I just want to see what they do with his speed. Where do they put his acceleration and his speed? Because that better be at like 55, 60. He should
I,
not be able
I
to move.
I saw someone tweet one time like this dude is actually Eli Manning. Like
Yes.
he's great at throwing, but he is not fast.
Yeah, he is Eli Manning, Peyton Manning out here in terms of mobility. I'm interested to see how they rate him. But like, um, yeah, I think I just would reserve 98, 99s for like top 3 picks in the draft, like or like Heisman contender ish level. Like
Ye-
Ollie Gordon, I do think should be like 98, like
mhm.
borderline 99. Like I think that's for sure. I had Will Campbell, LSU tackle, problem likely top 5, top 10 pick. I had him at 97.
So did people get pissed off when you had Garrett Nussmeier at 88?
No, no. Because
Okay,
nobody
that's
knows,
fair.
like, nobody really knows where like, I think he's gonna be damn good. Like, I
Mhm.
honestly think not to turn this into an, LSU podcast, but, like, I think he's gonna be good in a sense that, like, he could end up being a first round pick by the end of the year. Because I just think he's gonna put up big numbers, and he has a big arm, like, so I think he has to be, like, in that range, but I could see EA coming out and be like, he hasn't thrown enough. Yeah, he hasn't started many games. Like we don't know much about him. He's gonna be an 85. Like it wouldn't shock
Mhm.
me at all. But um,
Well, I think the unpredictability of the ratings is kind of why Arch Manning had to opt out because Arch Manning might have been a 99 overall after that spring game, and he has got to stay humble and hungry. You know what I mean? He can't be, he can't have
yeah,
a rating too high.
yeah. So that's Let me open your story right here while I have it open. Um, yeah, Quinn Ewers 96. Yeah, Caden Jenkins, SMU. Yeah, so I like this. I like this. Gabe
Give me,
Blair.
give me one you want to change. Let's have a let's have a debate here. Hold on, let me pull it up.
The thing is, you know more about Texas football in general than me. I'm trying to think of A&M. Where would you have Connor Wegman?
Ooh, I think Connor Wegman. We talk about risers. He's going to be one. I am so high on Connor Wegman. I think if
I'm
he's,
high on him too. I think he's
I
damn good.
I think
I
if
think I'm
he's
swayed because I watched him carve up LSU in College Station 2 years ago as a freshman. I was like, yeah,
like
he's
I think Connor Wegman on potential is like a 90, 92 overall
yeah.
guy. I think when he starts this game, he's going to be a flat 80 because he just
Whew.
hasn't played enough. I don't think that's harsh, man. He hasn't played enough.
God, but if you he's played. I mean, he's played on and off for 2 years. Like he's thrown enough passes. I feel like to know that he's good. Like
All right, maybe I'll go 85.
I
80
could
was
see
too harsh.
84, 85. Like him and Nussmeier are both gonna be like 84, 85 to start the game.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
Nussmeier's
But
a little better, but
Nussmeier is also he's got the NFL lineage one, but then he
yeah,
also has played in like the SEC championship game and stuff too. So he's
that
been
would be
on more.
crazy. Yeah,
Connor Wegman's been like last year. He played the first 3 games. Like it's
yeah,
forever ago. We haven't seen him in ages.
yeah. I don't have any more. I don't think because there's I'm not as plugged in as I mean I've watched them, but like I'm not going to debate you on Caden Jenkins from Baylor being an 87 because I I'm not plugged into the cornerback room at Baylor well enough. But I guess the last thing I had was Mike Craven did a really good story, obviously on the G5 P4 split,
Mhm.
and coaches talking about that. What do you think of that? How would you want it to work? Do you want it just, I guess, all the basic questions in terms of that topic?
I So I was so surprised on, and Craven's story was fantastic. If y'all haven't read it yet, it's called "A Split Is Coming." It's on the Dave Campbell's Texas
Yeah,
football website, texasfootball.com. He basically talked to all the coaches on his magazine stops and asked, what is the future of G5 football? And I was very surprised at the consensus of they're going to have to split up eventually. I know Sonny Dykes got roasted on Twitter because they pulled the quote of him saying Alabama and Louisiana Tech aren't playing the same sport.
yeah,
And everyone was quickly like, oh, but what about when you were in the national championship game and lost 65-7? Because people like to forget he beat Michigan too before he got to that
yeah.
game. And also, Sonny Dykes has been at Louisiana Tech. He was a coach there. So he is one to speak on that. And I agree with them. I mean, when you cover UNT and you see Group of Five, American Athletic Conference, is not the same as the big time SEC. I think what's happened right now in college football, and the most telling quote is Mike Bloomgren at the very end of the piece. He says, I'm not sure the G5 has much control over us being saved. I think that's about the Big Ten and SEC deciding to do what is right for football. And my thing with that is the SEC and Big Ten will not do what's right
Yeah.
because Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, the commissioners, follow the Milton Friedman economic doctrine, which is my job as a CEO is to get as much profit for the shareholders as possible. So I am only looking out for my conference. And that's exactly what they should do. How that works in the United States of America is there's also a federal government. And right now in the NCAA, there is no federal government because they stuck their head in the sand for 20, 30, 50 years on athletes being employees and getting compensated. And now they're just neck deep in courtroom litigation right now. So they can't, their hands are tied behind their back. They can't do anything. And in this, it's like you a Game of Thrones fan?
Nope, nope.
Oh,
But go ahead,
okay.
go on. You have a good analogy in your head.
So it's Littlefinger chaos is a ladder, right? And so we're in this chaos now, and Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti see that ladder to where now we got a 12-team playoff, and now the Big Ten and the SEC get all the most revenue. And now because we're so bloated with all the teams like Texas and Oklahoma, we got to have automatic qualifiers. It is now the power two.
Yes.
It is the power two, and it is the haves and have-nots. And for that reason, I agree with the coaches saying there needs to be a split of G5 and P4 football.
The sad part is that there were also, I don't remember who it was. One coach was like, at one point do they start to not need the bottom of those conferences? Like, at what point do they not need Vanderbilt in the SEC? At what point do they start trimming those teams as well? Because the elitist will start to continue like to raise the standard, and some teams just can't stay with it. That's why, Florida State and Clemson will leave eventually. Miami might leave eventually. So it's like, I just think which it will take something radical in order to fix this. And I've long said that just in my own mind, I'm not the biggest soccer fan, but like that format is the only one that makes sense. When you have this many teams and you have this many bodies of or this many like entities, you have to have some sort of promotion relegation in order to
Mm-hmm.
keep the entirety of the sport going. And I like personally that's what I would want is some sort of promotion relegation. If we're not going to do that, I do think you have to eventually split it up and have a G5 championship and name it something cooler than just G5 championship. Don't,
Of course.
completely be like, oh yeah, this is the second tier championship. You don't need to say that. But like you have to give them something to play for more than just a conference championship, which as a fan, North Texas fan, basketball, football, whatever, we're only focused on conference championships. Like that's all that matters. There's not a sense of like, can we get to the playoff? Like, can we do anything? If that happens, cool. But like we're not even focused on non-conference wins over like like UTSA versus Texas last year. Like that's not even a concern to me. Like UTSA maybe thought they could have won that game last year, sure, but like it's only about conference to me in basketball, football, everything because the ceiling is the ceiling for a North Texas program. It doesn't matter how often you beat a Baylor, right, in the football season. If you beat Baylor, then you beat Texas Tech the next year, something like that. Cool, But if you don't win the conference, then it's like it just feels like a one-off, and it's not going to raise your top end dollars unless you're consistently like beating those teams or winning your conference. Like the ceiling is the ceiling, and you
Mhm.
have to just live with that. And so I do think at the end of the day there has to be some sort of splits. It's going to take, and it's going to continue to shift every single year. So it's just at some point I would like them to just have a Big Two conference and just promote, relegate from there. Like that's my dream.
So you think the North Texas fan base, like they would be more in for a G5 playoff, still workshopping the name, of course, than that 1 out of 12 spot in the college football playoff, like trying to make
Yes.
that.
I
Okay.
I think if you had an 18 playoff for the G5, I think there would be infinite more interest from
Hmm.
North Texas fans, not from like the mass. And heck, I'm not worried about the casual college football fan or like ratings because nobody cares about Oregon versus Liberty. Like I'm sure that was
Facts.
probably the lowest rated game anyway. So like they don't care about that. So this is just for the G5 fans, just like the FCS championship is just for Montana State and South Dakota State. Like those fans fill up their stadiums and play. Like this has to be like just for the G5 programs, and it's not going to change anything revenue wise. It's still going to have the same impact. Like the games will be on ESPN2 or whatnot, but like I think that's North Texas fans would love to consistently be like, hey, like like Incarnate Word is like, or I guess was, I don't know what they do anymore, but like consistently in that FCS championship game or consistently in
Hmm.
the race for it. Like that's way better than if we said, "All right, FCS, your top dog will play Memphis and in a bowl in a game to win like the second championship or something." I don't know. But like I just think that's probably like the better outcome is you have more consistent buy-in every single year instead of just, oh, the one lucky team that has a golden ticket gets to go play in the playoff and get stomped by Oregon. Like the gap is too wide at this point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I also think for the G5, as the Power Two just becomes diet NFL national college football, basically like USC going to play Rutgers and flying
Yeah.
across country, the G5, we need to go full regional. Like Eric Morris had
Yeah.
a quote in Mike Craven's piece is like, I know people at North Texas will be more juiced if we're playing Rice, UTSA, Texas State, UTEP, and Sam Houston, as
Yep.
opposed to flying to Charlotte or East Carolina. Like I totally agree with that. I know I'm biased because I'm Dave Campbell's Texas football, of course. So I want all
It
those
would make life a
interstate
lot
matchups.
easier for you just to be like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
team is better than this team because they played." I don't know.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, but I think fans would just get a kick out of that more. I mean, I would be more juiced up for North Texas Sam Houston than I would be for North Texas FIU.
For sure. For sure. Like that's I agree. They have to go, it has to be regional, not only because it makes for more intriguing games and you get more local rivalries, but it also saves money. Hell. So just
Yeah,
need to
100%.
figure we need radical changes across the board. And I don't know, that might be the most tame radical thing, but it has to be more regionalized for G5. Um, especially. So that's anything else on that? I think we covered it well.
No, I think if the NCAA just listened to us right here, listen to this podcast, everything would be fixed and we'd all be good.
Just make I'm a just make students employees at this point, give them a salary cap, and then get the split going and have promotion relegation. There's my hot fix. That's what I will be doing on college football 25 when I change all the dynasty settings. That's what I will have. But all right, Carter. Kept you long enough. I had like 20 minutes planned and we go 43 minutes. So but I think we covered a lot of good stuff across Texas, across G5 football, everything. So thanks for coming on. We'll definitely have to do this again soon. We'll get Colin in here too once he's married and done, and done with all that stuff. But yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
Yes, sir. Enjoyed it.
For sure.